You know, it's funny how something you've held dear for generations can just vanish beneath a bulldozer's tracks. No warning, no chance to fight back. Just a 17-minute countdown until everything you love is crushed. That's exactly what happened to me. My great-grandfather's century-old house, the place where I was born, where my mother spent her last days, labeled by the HOA as an architectural violation. But to me, it was family, history, legacy. And what they didn't know was that beneath that land ran the lifeblood of this entire community's water supply, including the 2,000-head cattle ranch owned by the very woman who ordered the demolition. Let me back up a sec. I was sitting in what used to be my mother's sewing room, carefully folding her hand-embroidered handkerchiefs into a memory box, each stitch a story she told me while battling cancer, each one a fragile thread connecting me to her. Then the ground began to tremble, first faint, then like mechanical thunder rolling closer to my front door. When I looked outside, my blood ran cold. There it was, a massive bulldozer parked right at my property line, engine growling like some ancient beast. Behind it stood Victoria Blackwood, the HOA president, flanked by board members, county inspectors, and a lone cop who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. Victoria held up a clipboard with an official-looking document and pointed at my home like it was a nuisance that needed to be erased. "Mr. Thornfield," she announced, "your property poses an immediate safety hazard to the community. The house my family had weathered 2 tornadoes, dust bowls, and storms was suddenly a threat. Compromised foundation, imminent roof collapse, danger to neighbors." She handed me a report that felt off. The HOA logo was in the wrong font, the watermark strange, and the evidence photo was actually of a condemned building from a town miles away. They were using a fake report to justify demolition. I told her quietly, "This report's a fraud." But her smile, that shark smile, never faltered. "The decision's unanimous. Emergency board vote approved by county officials. We have full legal authority." Behind her, old Pete from 3 houses down rocked on his porch like this was the saddest play he'd ever seen. I almost smiled, because Pete always had that way about him. "You can't just bulldoze someone's home," I protested, but the bulldozer operator was already climbing in. Victoria's eyes flickered. For a moment, I caught what looked like regret, then steel resolve took over. Procedures followed. "Sorry it's come to this." And just like that, 17 minutes of grinding metal erased a century of memories. The wooden beams that had survived 100 storms splintered like toothpicks. The kitchen where my grandmother taught me to bake collapsed into rubble, and the porch where 3 generations watched sunsets disappeared under debris. Victoria watched with the same expression she might have reviewing quarterly budgets, utterly detached. When the dust settled and her crew dispersed, I stood alone in the wasteland that had been my front yard. But for the first time that day, I smiled. Because what Victoria didn't know was buried beneath the rubble, something the Thornfield family had guarded for 100 years. That night, I sat by my mother's grave, telling her everything. "They think they won, Mom." The cemetery was quiet except for the hum of traffic, and I swear I could hear her whisper back, "Use your mind, son, not your emotions. That's how you honor what we built." The next morning, instead of fleeing to my motel, I went straight to what was left of the property. The debris had been cleared away, leaving a flat patch of earth, but behind a cluster of oak trees, I found it. The rusted metal door to the root cellar my great-grandfather dug in 1924. I pulled it open, and the musty air smelled like history itself. Inside, I found something more valuable than old preserves, a leather portfolio wrapped in oilcloth containing the original blueprints for the regional water system he had designed. Every line, every note, told the story of pipes snaking under my land, supplying water to dozens of properties, including Victoria's massive ranch. Tucked behind those blueprints was a legal document from 1924 establishing perpetual water rights for the Thornfield family, rights that superseded every development that came after. I took photos of every page, every signature, every seal, and it hit me. Victoria's entire operation, her 2,000 cattle, her influence, all depended on water flowing through pipes controlled by my family. I found the valve chamber just as the blueprints indicated and saw the massive brass wheel, green with age but solid. Turning this valve could cut off water to over half the community, including her ranch. The power in my hands was intoxicating, but I wasn't ready to act. Mom always said, Smart people gather information before they make moves. I called Marcus Rivera, the only lawyer in town who specialized in property disputes and happened to be one of the few who'd come to Mom's funeral. When I asked if century-old water rights could still be legally binding, he said, "Ezra, that's serious stuff. Water rights like those are often grandfathered in and can supersede later developments. You might be sitting on something powerful." Just then, I got a text from an unknown number. "Mr. Thornfield, spreading lies about the HOA won't help. Some in town worry about your mental state since your mother's death. Maybe it's time for professional help." Victoria's psychological warfare had begun. I smiled. She was worried enough to start playing dirty. The following days were a whirlwind. Victoria spread rumors about my sanity, but I fought back by inviting neighbors to a memorial for Mom on the empty lot where our house stood. Word spread fast. Neighbors brought food, old Pete even brought his famously crispy cornbread, and local journalist Sarah Chin showed up, intrigued. By noon, nearly 40 people had gathered, turning what was supposed to be a symbol of Victoria's power into a community celebration. I shared stories about Mom, about how our family believed in taking care of neighbors and how my great-grandfather built the water system beneath our feet. Then I dropped the truth. The water system was still ours to control. Victoria arrived like a storm, dressed to intimidate, but the crowd stood strong. When she accused me of spreading misinformation, I offered her some of Pete's cornbread, a little crispy but made with love. The crowd shifted, Victoria's composure cracked, and she stormed off. Marcus warned me Victoria had hired a crisis firm specializing in character assassination. I nodded. Mom taught me sometimes you have to get dirty to plant something beautiful. Then came the legal threats, cease and desist orders accusing me of defamation, emotional distress, and conspiracy to incite disorder. But the real bombshell came from Marcus, who dug into Victoria's finances. Turns out she'd embezzled over $2 million from HOA funds to buy that ranch and other properties nearby, building a private empire with community money. I sat in my truck, thinking about Mom's words. Sometimes you have to be strong to protect what's sacred. It was time to test my leverage. I turned the valve just enough to reduce water pressure to Victoria's ranch. Within hours, county officials called asking about pressure drops, and Victoria herself called, demanding to know what I was doing. When I told her it was routine maintenance on our family system, she dropped the act and tried to negotiate, offering $2.5 million for my land, more than 5 times its assessed value. I lied smoothly. "I'll consider it." But I knew this wasn't about money. It was about something bigger. I met with Sarah Chin to share everything: the water rights, the embezzlement, the suspicious urgency behind demolishing my house. Sarah's eyes lit up. This was no ordinary local story. It was corruption on a massive scale. Then came the twist I never saw coming. Sarah's drone photos revealed Victoria's ranch wasn't what it seemed. The supposed cattle barns were chemical labs, methamphetamine processing and storage, part of the largest synthetic drug operation the DEA had been tracking for 18 months. The ranch was a fortress for a $50 million a year cartel network. Suddenly, everything clicked. The house demolition to prevent surveillance, the desperate land purchase offers, the embezzlement, all to protect a criminal empire. The DEA needed my house gone because it was the only place with a clear view of the labs. I was now the unwitting key witness in a massive federal case. Agent Rebecca Martinez arrived, a no-nonsense DEA agent who laid it all out. Victoria Blackwood wasn't just a HOA president. She was a cartel coordinator, a criminal mastermind hiding behind a perfect suburban mask. The plan was clear. I was to turn off the valve completely, cutting water to the ranch, forcing evacuation, and allowing the DEA to raid the operation. Sitting underground in my great-grandfather's valve chamber, surrounded by federal agents, I turned the valve. Within hours, the ranch went dark. Men in hazmat suits scrambled, equipment was loaded hurriedly, and Victoria's facade cracked as she made a desperate call to her cartel contacts. The DEA swarmed in with helicopters and breaching charges, dismantling the operation while I watched from my hidden vantage point. Victoria was arrested right where my house once stood. As they led her away, she looked straight at the valve chamber and mouthed one word: "Why?" I knew the answer. Some things are worth protecting, and sometimes the person who seems weakest holds all the power. months later, standing in front of the new house built on the old lot. With the community rallied and the Thornfield Community Rights Foundation established, IR